It's Thursday. If you're in the Pacific Ocean, it's morning. Otherwise, it's Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening, depending on where you are, or late Wednesday. But anyway, it's time for the Nerd Log, and we got two amazing guests. Let's start with the person who's part of the New Relic team, Zain. Say hi to the people down towards the center of the screen. Tell them what you do for New Relic.
Hey, I'm Zain Asgar, and I used to be the co-founder and CEO of Pixie Labs, and we got acquired by New Relic. And at New Relic, I'm the GM of both the Pixie team and also all the open ecosystem projects that we do. So I focus primarily on open source at New Relic. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
And we've got to have you on at some point to talk about the sort of amazing transformation. I've been working with New Relic tools for a long time, and that transformation as we adopt open source, but here we're talking about something else, something definitely related to open source, and that brings us to our second guest. Priyanka, say hi to the people and tell them what you do, not for New Relic, but for the world.
Hello, everybody. I am Priyanka Sharma. Thank you for that warm welcome. I run the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or CNCF. We are home to well-known infrastructure technology projects such as Kubernetes, Prometheus, Envoy, and really over 120 others. We have the largest open source conferences in the world, known as KubeCon, Cloud Native Cons, and we take great pride in supporting infrastructure around the world from companies everywhere.
I love that. And I am super excited. This is our first time, but I certainly hope not the last time that we're talking to the CNCF on stream because, frankly, my journey with even Kubernetes started with reading like the FIPI pages on Kubernetes, Kubernetes for Children. We were talking about last week. We had a fantastic Twitter space with Andrew Brown talking about all the great stuff the CNCF does. And we were talking there about how someone breaks into the SRE role. And, I really see that as one of the things that we really talked about fundamentally there was how it used to be that any kind of operations role was much harder to just sort of break into because the path was not there, right?
Correct.
That, you want to learn to be a Python web dev. There's a web page that says these exact things are what you must know, and here are the free resources to learn all about them. But that really was not. If you become a Linux admin on your own, the documents existed, but the path was not there. But the CNCF is really starting to help lay out that path, which I think is amazing. So,
thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Something's working.
Something's working. Yeah, right. Especially because I work in DevRel, so the better it is that information is out there. The happier I am. So we're talking about something fun this time, which is sort of it's a question that I get asked in New Relic all the time, which is sort of what's going on everywhere. Right? People, they're not like, oh, what's going on at this one, but what's Netflix doing or what's this other FANG thing doing, right? It's like, what is happening everywhere across the industry? And so this is our annual survey 2021, so the CNCF's annual survey 2021. So tell us a little bit. This has been going on for a while. We've been doing these annual surveys.
Yes, that's right. So CNCF has been conducting online surveys since 2016, which was, I think, our first year in existence. We started in 2015, but first real year in existence. And back then we had like 99 respondents. And since then, every year we have consistently been running these surveys. And this time around, it grew so much that we actually had to do a two-part survey because, as you know, we started with Kubernetes. And since then, now we have over 122 projects. And then also, we had like over 3,000 respondents, 3,200 something. And what we also realized as we, went through this project was, the world has changed a lot with Cloud Native. We have been, Cloud Native has been the building blocks for a lot of innovation. And what that means is a lot of people and companies are in the fold, and there's a lot of diversity of experiences.
When you said you had 99 responses in 2016, I was almost like, that sounds like you probably got everyone, right? The expansion has been massive. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. No, you're spot on. Exactly. But what I was saying was with all this growth and many voices we figured the one way to really show what may be going on in at least a segment of the population is production data. And so that's where the collaboration with New Relic and Datadog came in. Thank you so much for sharing valuable information with us. And I believe the survey has now changed forever into this composite piece of information.
So I want to hear more from Priyanka, but it's I'm trying to learn to be a host, folks. I'm trying to do a good job. But I want to hear Zain talk for a minute. When did you get involved, Zain, with this report?
Yeah, so I've been involved with various things with the CNCF for a while now. I'm one of the governing board members at CNCF, and for those who are not aware, Pixie is actually a sandbox project as well. So we're pretty active in the community and ecosystem, and it's been great working with Priyanka and the team on all of this stuff. For us in particular, just the ubiquity of the cloud native ecosystem and the use of like Kubernetes and everything else across deployment systems is what drives us, and that's kind of the motivation behind things like Pixie, which do ubiquitous monitoring which allow like easy monitoring for Kubernetes clusters.
Yeah. And if you don't know about the Pixie, obviously, now integrated with New Relic, available as an open source project, and quite fantastic. You'll see links in the show notes to more about that because you only can sort of drive by on that one. But yeah, that's a huge piece of the story of the now very open source way that people are able to gather data from their systems, which used to be for tools like New Relic a very secret sauce, right? Now we're saying, no, that stuff is open source, right? Collecting data is very open source. And if you want to work with the Prometheus project, if you want to use an open source tool to collect that data, that's also available as an open source project. And I know that's part of what CNCF does as well.
Yep.
So, but let's talk about takeaways from the report this year. So, of course, we're seeing growth, right? And anybody who's on LinkedIn and mentions that they one time touched a Kubernetes cluster knows that there's great growth in this space. But can we put some numbers to that? Can we put some specificity to that?
Yes, absolutely. So the growth in just survey respondents is one small way of seeing how things are changing. Mm-hmm. But I think when we looked at the annual survey, what was really awesome is much over 90% of people say they are either evaluating using Kubernetes or already using Kubernetes in production. And I think that is a great stat that demonstrates just how many people out there are starting to rely on Kubernetes. Now, another piece that I think is important to note is
let's switch over to the screen share so we can, if you want to highlight, I'm going to turn that on now. So now people are seeing the front page of the annual survey. Wait, they're not yet because I didn't hit the send live button. One of the many shortcomings of social live. But it's up now. Now people can see it.
Awesome. I see it too. Wonderful. Yeah. Yes, so this is our pretty survey. Everybody can see it. And you can see here, support from New Relic right here. And so thank you again.
Hey, anytime.
Awesome. But yeah, as I was telling you, uniquely done survey this time, right? With all kinds of data sources, etc. 38% growth in just responders. When we think about, sorry, this is just demographics, which I can skip over.
Well, but while you're scrolling through this, I just want to say that increase in respondents really matters because the gap between saying, hey, I'm trying this out, I'm evaluating, I'm thinking about it, and hey, I want to know information about this, will you spend some time to come and tell me about it? That's very different than, oh yeah, I've heard of that, it sounds cool, right? Like it really says a lot that people are truly engaged.
Absolutely.
But anyway, go ahead. I think we're here to the meat.
Yes, I think this is a really important statistic, but I said over 90%, sorry, 96%, which, when people say over 90, you think 91 or 90.5. But anyway, most people basically are either using or evaluating Kubernetes. And here was something you'll find interesting, which I thought was cool, was we are now breaking down these answers based on geography, because what started off as a fairly local trend, I would say, like the very first localization was, hey, West Coast USA. And from there on, like we cover all of North America, Europe really came on board. And this year in particular, we've had massive engagement from Africa. And so you see the numbers, right? Now, keep in mind, as you look at these numbers, you might be like, oh, wow, Africa has 73%, North America has 55%. It's a percentage. So,
so there's a lot of respondents, right? With exactly. If you take, like not just the Bay Area, but also Boston, right? Now you're up into the thousands of respondents.
Exactly. So this, I think, is some cool information. I will
But it does show this classic thing that economist Balmoral wrote about, which is leapfrogging, right? Where
Yes.
for example, the move to high band RF technology in
Yes.
Africa and South Asia is another example where by not fully adopting one model, let's say a distributed cloud model with virtual
Yes.
machines, and then
Yes.
sort of coming along at a certain time, you do see that markets that are developing actually have better, adoption of things like Kubernetes or serverless models or that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think another important piece here, and we got really useful information from New Relic on that, was that not everybody, sorry, that's an exaggeration. A lot of people are using Kubernetes under the hood or managed services.
Mm-hmm.
And that number keeps growing, and it makes sense, right? Because I think I read it in your in New Relic blog post, I think today, where it was like, folks, we really did a good job of trying to demystify Kubernetes, make it easy,
Yeah.
etc. But people are like, that's cool, but like, how about if we don't have to do this?
Yeah.
And so Kubernetes has definitely gone under the hood. So you can see we have certified Kubernetes hosted platforms. CNCF certifies these platforms as being like, keeping up with the open source project and all of that. And 79% of survey respondents said this. And I think New Relic stat is 92% of their production users are using Kubernetes managed.
And that's often, the correlation there is pretty obvious, right? If you're using a managed observability tool like New Relic, right, it might make sense that you would also maybe looking into like a managed Kubernetes tool. And this is really basic to me. This really opened my eyes because when I saw the top line number, and I'm going to talk for a little bit, even though I'm the host. Sorry, folks.
Oh, no, go for it.
When I saw the number of like, here's what Kubernetes adoption is, I said, that doesn't make sense to me. and I have this sort of canard that I will say, which is, I started out with a serverless CI/CD tool called Stackery back in the day. And, if you had asked me then, that would have been maybe 4 years ago, which is going to be the default, a cluster that's in every, or a tool that's in every single, technology stack, is it going to be serverless or is it going to be Kubernetes? I thought the answer was very obvious. The idea that, my Twitter name, Serverless Mom, would be out of date and I need to change it to like Cluster Mom or Container Mom now. It completely surprised me. I had sort of exposed myself to both and was like, oh no, this is so much easier and it makes so much more sense.
Of course.
Part of the discovery here is that Kubernetes is really jumping that gap. And part of the story there is a lot of people are using it without going all the way into the whole stack, without climbing very far up the stack and just saying, okay, this is going to ensure uptime. This is going to let us pull on some very simple levers to control how we handle downtime and scaling needs. And so, so we're seeing it everywhere now.
And I would say that serverless Kubernetes are not mutually exclusive in any way, right? Both are part of the story. I think Kubernetes has just become kind of like a foundational layer, and serverless is one way you run workloads which are, suitable to that. So I think it's all part of the story.
And in fact, I read something, and it was, of all things, just like a random Reddit comment that really stuck with me that said, one of the most successful things about containerized workloads is it sort of pushes the way that developers think about running code further up the stack. And the concept of, hey, you have this individual machine and it sort of doesn't matter what its base layer is, and it can run in as many instances as you need. And it pushes that thinking, further and further into the actual deployment cycle, right? So there's not this big gap between writing the code and running it operationally.
Absolutely. And, with the ubiquity of containers, and I think what happened really like solidified in 2021 is that containers and Kubernetes are a package deal, basically. So those trend lines were moved together.
Yeah, Zain, I wonder if you have something to think about that. It is interesting that, I often, when I don't want to just sort of sound like a broken record, I'll mention like containerized workloads. There are other ways to containerize workloads. But I obviously Pixie was targeting Kubernetes from the start, but it really has been quite a transition that the other containerized workload systems are really falling off the map, and we're seeing Kubernetes absolutely becoming the default. Can you talk about that a little bit, Zain?
Yeah, I think, for us, when we were a startup, we kind of made a bet, for Kubernetes, right? We looked at a lot of different frameworks. Maybe some of this had to do with my background and maybe our team's background at Google. We thought like Kubernetes was a good platform for us to back. And we actually was the other thing we were really looking at was serverless, because I think that was another big piece that people are still thinking about. And our thinking at that point was that a lot of the serverless stuff will eventually run on Kubernetes, and I think we're seeing that happening now, where Kubernetes is this platform layer that not only supports your applications but can run as a base system to even run serverless workloads by using things like Knative or other things that run on top of Kubernetes.
Yep.
So we kind of made at that point a pretty bold bet for Kubernetes, and it turned out to be the right move.
Yeah, I love that, and frankly, it felt like that whatever it was 5 years ago, right? That it's like, oh well, let's try to pick something that we think is going to grow, and definitely Kubernetes and serverless not mutually exclusive or even really the same layer, right? So it's like it's a bit like saying chocolate cake or vanilla icing, right? They're just in different spots, but I suppose what was so interesting to me is that the general idea of running little snippets of code on a public cloud and pushing all of the platform considerations off to that public cloud did not become the default, right? And so even when people are using hosted Kubernetes or managed Kubernetes, they still want that control over concurrency and other components.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages of using something like Kubernetes is that you can get both the control but the ease of use with all the managed services on top of it.
Awesome board member.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly the thing is like, it is, automation writ large, right? And sort of you read back in the Google SRE book from like 2016 is right. The idea is that you're reducing toil. And even if you're doing a ton of work creating an automation, the fact is that you are going to reduce the total amount of toil. And my very start in technology was tech support for New Relic, if you can believe it. And there, you were still working when I started was 7 years ago. You were still working with people who were seeing, hey, we're running out of memory, we're running out of capacity. Just go ahead and run a few CLI commands and then you'll scale up. And that was totally normal for these major, services that we would just consider foundational to the internet. And that was just every day, right? Oh, you don't need this capacity. Let's go ahead and scale down, right? But that in 2016, that model completely changed. And that feels very, very major. So, but there's a third point, Priyanka, that we wanted to cover. A sort of almost kind of a fork away from this, a lot of people using managed services, which is about people climbing up that stack.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that I would like to highlight a certain report slide for that, LOL. Basically, absolutely. With Kubernetes having matured to mainstream, more and more organizations are moving up this cloud native stack, and like that Kubernetes being the foundational layer with its APIs and interfaces. I think some major changes just generally happened last year, which gave runtime container runtimes like a big boost in usage. You see 500% increase year over year on Containerd, and Envoy, Fluentd, Prometheus. All these numbers are here, many of which we got from your help. So that was thanks again. But this is proof right here, right? That the usage is growing, and it makes sense, right? I don't think any of this information is shocking. Even the 500% number when you know what all the things that happened in 21. So that's definitely the case. I think there will come a time when Kubernetes will be so mature, people won't know they're using it, because we already see that happen. And that's a good thing. So all in all, up and to the right.
Yeah, and this is an interesting idea that we're thinking about, which is that one of the things that I kind of find fascinating. Maybe I was just in a different place in the technology stack, but there was a point when like Linux became the default way to run a server, right? It was always a way, in fact, a very big way, but at some point it became the default way, and it sort of didn't happen with trumpets. It just sort of happened, right? And it's interesting to see. Kubernetes is in this process where a lot of people are talking about it, but eventually it will just become, oh yeah, that's sort of just how you do this, right? And that'll become part of the landscape. Zain, I'm curious what you think. Do you think that as sort of somebody who's trying to work in web development, learn, Django and Python web development, because that's one example I'm stuck with today, are they going to become someone who is a qualified Kubernetes operator in, 5-10 years? Or is it going to be something that's just kind of happening in the background for them?
Yeah, so I think the way that all these systems evolve over time is that it just becomes like dead simple to use for the common use cases, right? Like, I like Netlify as as a great example of this, right? Where it used to be kind of annoying. You used to go set up a web service or something to host your own website, manage all the deployments, do all that stuff. It's something like Netlify, you point it to your GitHub repo and, it deploys it, puts it on the CDN for you. Everything's done automatically. So I think you'll see a lot more of that stuff for workloads. It'll eventually be backed by something like Kubernetes, but there'll be layers of abstraction that'll make it easy for anyone to just run, simple applications or even relatively complex applications.
Yeah, it's almost, and I love you, everybody, at the org I'm about to mention, but it's almost like the promise of Heroku sort of writ large, right? It's like, hey, we can drag this slider, and by the way, if you talk to the Heroku people now, they'll say, hey, we were the first with containers, which is entirely true.
Yeah.
But this much deeper level of control, customization, and auto scaling is going to be available.
Right. I think at the enterprise scale, the thing that really matters is that you want to make easy things easy, but hard things possible. And I think a lot of the platform as a service systems don't make the hard things possible.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'm working with an open source tool, Opta, right now that does like an abstraction on top of Terraform. And again, I this sort of layer of abstraction is really important because you have to give people access to that base layer, right? And that's kind of fascinating to me. So, talk about moving up the stack a little bit, Priyanka. I think of this as being that we're adopting like tooling on top of Kubernetes to do things like observability and auto scaling and other components. Is that sort of what we mean by the term here?
Yes, absolutely. Your Kubernetes as the foundational layer, which everyone can forget they're using, and think about more everyday problems that include observability, that include logging is part of observability, but you get the point.
Compliance, security. Hey, I know
all of that stuff, right? So when you have that base there, you think of those closer to business problems, I would say. Yeah. And that's what I mean by moving up the stack. And I love what you said, Zain, about making, easy things easy and hard things possible.
Yep.
I'm going to tweet that, just FYI.
Yeah, that's a good foundation to live by. By the way, Netlify fans, we got super excited by Netlify. Do stay tuned. We're talking about Netlify in our next segment with Aaron. But we'll get to it for sure. And I think that sort of is the thing, and it's why Heroku pinged in my mind that at Future Stack this year. And by the way, do keep your eye out for Future Stack registrations, our little user conference. We're gonna have Sam Aaron, who does like a system where you can write Python and it makes or write Ruby and it makes like a music play. It's like a beat editor. And what I love about the SonicPy project is that he had made a music editor before that was for musicians and that no one could use. And I think he's like, I got one user ever. And then he made SonicPy, which was for children. And it is now used all over the world and by all these people, right? And again, this thing of like, maybe SonicPy does oversimplify, but it is like it makes the easy things easy, right? It's like creating a loop and turning off and on loops is very, very easy. So, Priyanka, is there anything else you want us to take away from the report? I turned off the screen share just for the moment so we could get all our beautiful faces. But is there other stuff you want us to see from the report or want to make sure that people take away from this?
I think it's really, first of all, definitely read the report. That's step one. No. I highly encourage people getting familiar with this because if you are in this journey, you'll see you have company, right? And it's good to see the trends that are happening. I also would like to give a shout out again to New Relic and Datadog and Slashdata that all helped us with additional information. And it's a call out. Anyone who is interested in participating like this with us and following the New Relic example, you're welcome to reach out. This is CNCF is a open collaboration space, and we welcome information from everybody for future iterations.
Nice. And I really like that. Now, folks, down in the show notes, you will see links to the report, links to our coverage of it, and how New Relic contributed, which is really neat. I do recommend checking it out, especially to get a sense of if you're having that conversation with your boss about leveling up with Kubernetes, you might have a little bit of backup here to say where the industry is.
Exactly.
But otherwise, folks, check out CNCF, check out some of the instructional materials, check out a really great set of workshops. There's a really easy way to like register for stuff to find local events right on the page. It is by far the easiest of the open source orgs to like navigate and get information from. So I recommend checking it out. Priyanka, are there other things you'd like to ask people to do, or places you'd like to be? As we always say about social media, where would you like to be found?
Oh, Twitter all the way, every day, always on it. It's a problem. But Twitter for sure. And also in person in KubeCon Cloud Native Con Valencia in Spain.
Nice.
Highly recommend showing up for the party. It is May 17th to 19th, with 2 days before for co-located events such as EVPF Day, WASM Day, Knative Day, all kinds of cool stuff. So highly recommend people checking out KubeCon Cloud Native Con Europe. I will, if it's okay, quickly show for anyone who doesn't know where to go, the kubecon.io is the easy page, which lists all this information. But if I may, people can look at my screen real quick.
Yep. Screen's up.
Yep, awesome. KubeCon Cloud Native Con Europe, and it's gonna happen. I think all the trends are looking good for us to be there in person. For those who can't, you can join virtually.
Yeah, and guess what? Do look for us as well. I think Daniel, Kim, and I will for sure be there.
Awesome.
I of course I'm going to share a link to Priyanka's Twitter in the Twitch and LinkedIn and other chats, and you'll see a link down in the show notes as well. But yeah, do join us at KubeCon Europe, and we'll list the event info as well in the show notes. Zain, do you have final thoughts of places you want to be found or things you'd like people to check out?
Yeah, I guess either on Twitter, or I'll also be at KubeCon in Valencia. So really looking forward to the event.
Nice.
KubeCon's amazing, so everyone should try to go out there. And the fact that it's in Valencia, Spain, makes it even better.
I love that. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're going to have Aaron on for our next segment, but do check out the Nerd Log every Thursday. We're going to go to the Be Right Back screen. Thank you again for coming out.